Hello, my name is Erica Phillips, and I am a consultant with the MAPS Group. We are working with the City of Dunn this fall to conduct a citywide classification and compensation study. We like to offer employee orientation meetings to staff to give them an opportunity to learn about the study and ask questions. We have conducted 8 different meetings with employees over the last few weeks, but we understand that it can be hard for employees to get to meetings due to a variety of reasons. Therefore, we wanted to make sure we provided the staff with the meeting slides and an abbreviated overview of the employee orientation meetings. If you have any questions about the study, please feel free to reach out to Connie Jernigan, or you're welcome to email me at any time. Thank you. The MAPS Group was founded in 1983 and currently consists of 8 different consultants across the state of North Carolina. We partner with different municipalities, counties, districts, that may be housing authorities, water districts, libraries, and other public organizations, and provide a variety of human resources services. Some examples of some of the services we do provide include classification and pay studies, which is what we're doing for the City of Dunn. We also will write personnel policies or help update and develop personnel policies that an organization may already have on file. We do a variety of team building events. We also provide leadership, supervisory, and management training, and we'll help organizations if they're trying to update or create a performance appraisal or performance review process for the employees. In addition, we also work with public organizations in providing assessment center processes where we might have an organization that might be recruiting for, typically it might be different department heads, police chief, finance director, city manager, county manager, and we'll help them with the interview process, setting up a 1 or 2 day assessment center process to help them make those important decisions. We will conduct employee climate surveys, employee engagement surveys to give the organization that information so they can make some decisions and have a pulse on their employee environment at that moment. And we also will fill in for vacancies in human resources if that's a need that an organization has. The next 2 slides provide a snapshot of some of the clients we've worked with over the last few years. As I mentioned, we work with a variety of municipalities, towns across the state, and they vary in size. So it might be a small organization such as Oak Island or Fairmont, or it can be a large municipality such as the town of Apex. We also work with counties, a variety of counties across the state. In addition, we work with nonprofits such as housing authorities, libraries, water authorities. We've worked with the North Carolina League of Municipalities and some regional council of governments. The primary purpose of a classification and compensation study is to ensure that the city's classification and pay plan is up to date and market competitive to be able to recruit qualified employees to work for the city, as well as motivate and retain current employees. The study's primary objectives are to review the city's current position classification structure. This involves reviewing and analyzing individual positions to re-examine their responsibilities, job requirements, and the work performed, and then classify the positions according to position classification analysis standards. We will then recommend updated class titles if needed. Sometimes you do not need updated class titles. Positions may be appropriately titled as they are. We will then survey the market of comparable organizations to determine representative rates of compensation and to develop and recommend an updated pay plan. We will be looking at pay equity between positions and recommend classifications with similar levels of responsibilities and similar salary grades. In addition, we will make some recommendations on potential career ladders and classifications where it is appropriate and other career education incentives. As I mentioned, this study will look at the City of Dunn's current classification and pay plan or pay system. This slide shows an example of a sample classification system. It is not from the city of Dunn or any other city, and it's just a snapshot of a couple of salary grades to give you an idea of when I'm talking about a classification and pay plan, what I'm talking about. A class and pay plan will assign job titles to different salary grades. And then each salary grade has an assigned salary range, typically with a minimum and a maximum salary. There's a midpoint, which is typically halfway between the minimum and the maximum. So the classification and pay plan will identify which jobs should be classified together in the different salary grades. For example, in this scenario, the park maintenance technician and the street maintenance worker are both salary grade 16 with a salary range of $26,520 to $41,106. And typically what you'll find is employees that are in those job titles, the park maintenance technician, the street maintenance worker, their salaries are going to fall somewhere between the minimum and the maximum. Hiring, where they might hire a new hire into those positions, differs depending on the organization's compensation or pay philosophy. A lot of organizations will start at the minimum. Some will start you a little bit higher than the minimum if you have experience, skills, education above those minimum requirements. So it just differs depending on each organization. The end result of this study will be an updated classification plan that will look similar to this slide. There'll be new salary grades. The classification titles will be listed in individual salary grades, and it'll have updated salary ranges based on the market data and the salary data that we obtain. There are many reasons why it's important to conduct a classification and compensation study periodically. You want to make sure that your class and pay plan is up to date and in line with the market for those recruitment and retention purposes that we've mentioned earlier. Also, jobs change over time. So there's new technology that's offered, new software that probably changes some of the duties, new regulations that might change some things. There's also new services that may be offered, provided to the community. There could be a shift in duties or a complete reorganization in some of the departments. So you want to make sure that your classifications are capturing all these changes and making sure that you're keeping an eye on those and making sure the positions are properly classified and then in the correct salary range. In addition, the market changes at different rates for different types of positions. Several years ago, I worked at UNC and we were recruiting for a lot of different medical positions. And at that time we had, it was very difficult to recruit for dental hygienists and ultrasound technicians. You can imagine the state does not have the same level of pay, the same level of benefits that these employees were getting in the private sector, where they could work just a couple days a week, making a lot more money, very different kinds of benefits. So we had to take a look at that and make the decision to increase the salary ranges for those types of positions, not necessarily for all of them, but for those, because the market at that time made it very difficult to try to recruit for those careers. And so what we see in the private sector changes over time as well. Right now, a lot of organizations are having difficulty recruiting for law enforcement, police chiefs. A lot of times there's issues trying to find qualified finance directors, also building code inspectors. When the economy is doing really well, there's a lot of development and building going on. Building code inspectors can leave and go out into the private sector and work with some of these companies. A lot of times make a lot more money, might have a truck, a vehicle, some different hours. So the market changes and you want to make sure that you're looking at those market rates and making sure you're capturing those if you need to update some of your classification salary ranges. Also, a big part of the classification study, as I mentioned, is just updating those job classifications, which a lot of people will call job descriptions, but making sure that those are up to date and capturing those changes we talked about earlier, because positions do change over the years. And you want to make sure that they're up to date. It helps with recruiting. When human resources is trying to fill certain kinds of positions, having an up-to-date job description can help create those job ads, job flyers, also help creating interview questions when it's time to bring in candidates to interview for those positions. If we decide that we're going to be creating different kinds of career paths or career ladders, having those job descriptions up to date is very helpful. Also making sure we look at the different classification grades for those different career ladders. And we're going to be ensuring legal compliance in all the work that we do. So specifically, we'll be looking at the Fair Labor Standards Act in regards to the positions. Typically, that's going to be looking at whether or not a position should be exempt or non-exempt in regards to the Fair Labor Standards Act. And we'll be making some recommendations on that, as well as making sure that the job descriptions or the class specifications are compliant with the ADA. In regards to studying the positions within the city, we will be looking at every classification and every position within the city of Dunn. We'll be looking at the positions to ensure the job titles are correct and accurately reflect the work that's being performed. Again, we'll be looking at the job description or the class specification and making sure that those capture all the current work duties. It may be that we find some of the classification titles or the job titles are correct and they do not need to change in any way. They may be titled appropriately for the position. We'll also be making recommendations for salary ranges for those individual positions based on the salary data we collect in the market and internal equity within the organization and other positions. We want to basically ensure that the classification, the pay plan is accurate, it's equitable, it's sensitive to the markets, and it's sustainable so that the city can sustain this classification and pay plan for the next few years. A couple things we want to make sure you understand about a classification and pay study. One is there is no guarantee that there would be pay raises or reclassifications for positions. Sometimes we will do the study and find that positions are properly classified, so they have the correct title, and they might be in a pay grade or salary range that's appropriate based on the market and internal equity. So there's not a guarantee that there would be a change in pay or classification. The second thing is there are no pay decreases that would be recommended. So we do not ever recommend pay decreases. If there's a time when there's a position that might go into a salary grade that might seem lower, there might be a shift or a change, that would just be a title change or a salary grade change, no pay change for the incumbent employee. In addition, this study is not about eliminating any positions, so we are not doing any kind of a staffing study where we look to see how many positions should be in a department or if there's some that shouldn't be in the department or positions that may not be needed by the city. So it's not a staffing study, and we're not going to be looking at suggesting any kind of particular kinds of positions or eliminating any. We also want to make sure you know that part of this study, when we put together our report at the end, it's going to be recommendations to the management and to the city council, the board. So our role is to come in and take a look at the pay plan, take a look at the classifications, and make recommendations. But any changes would need to be approved by the city manager and also the board. So they would have to decide what they'd want to approve from our recommendations. Wanted to mention as well that we are not studying individual employees as far as their work performance. So we're not going to be asking questions when we come in for the interviews about how well employees are doing their job, how well they may get along with their supervisor, get along with other employees. We're truly just studying the position, what the job does, what the position's required to do, and not the person in the position. What is involved in a classification and compensation study? This slide is to give you an idea of the steps that we'll be taking over the next few months and what typically you'll see happen when an organization embarks on a classification and pay study. So the first thing is the organization needs to identify the need to do a study, which City of Dunn decided a couple months ago that they felt the need to conduct a classification and pay study. It's been several years since they've looked at the classifications and looked at the pay plan, and they felt that it was time to do so.
Beyond that, we then meet with the department heads, which we did a couple weeks ago. We do an orientation with the department heads, letting them know what the process is going to look like, what their role in the study will be. We also talk to them about the market salary survey, which we'll go into some of that a little bit later. Then we come back and we do employee orientation meetings. And we did 8 different meetings over the last 2 weeks. We want to make sure the employees have an opportunity to find out what is involved in a classification and pay study, what their role will be, and give them an opportunity to ask any questions that they might have. This PowerPoint was put together for employees that may not have had an opportunity to attend an orientation meeting. We wanted to make sure you still had access to most of the slides and some of the information that was shared in those meetings. Employees then will be completing the position description questionnaire form. And I believe Connie's already sent that out in an email. Employees can do that in writing, so we're fine if you want to print it out and then handwrite in your questionnaire, or you can also, it's fillable, so you can also complete it online. And that questionnaire will give us some information on the position, duties, what you spend most of your time doing throughout the day, throughout the week, what some of the most difficult parts of your job may be, what some of the skills, education requirements, knowledge that you feel are needed to do your position successfully. Then once we have all those questionnaires in, we will take a look at those, review them, and we'll come back to the city and we'll conduct interviews with employees, one-on-one interviews, and we'll use the position questionnaire form to help us in conducting those interviews. Typically, they last 20 to 30 minutes. Maybe a little bit longer depending on how much detail you might get into with some of the job duties. All employees have an opportunity for an interview. The only time we might not do an interview with an employee is if there's a group of employees that are in the exact same position with the exact same duties, and they agree that one of them can actually interview with us on behalf of the other employees. But they do need to agree to that, and they do need to decide who would interview on their behalf. So a lot of times I might see that if there's like a shift of firefighters and they all agree that they have the same duties, no one's doing something a little bit different, and they're okay with one employee coming and doing the interview on behalf of that shift. Then once we've completed the interviews, we'll be doing analysis on our end. So we'll be starting to look at the different positions, looking at the different classification factors. We'll also be doing the salary survey work. So we'll be reaching out to other organizations and starting to compare the City of Dunn salary survey with the salary survey data that we get. And then we'll be getting that ready for the report. We'll then draft a report for management to take a look at. It is a draft, and that way they have the opportunity to look and see if they feel like we missed anything, if we were off on anything, and then we'll do a final report that we will present to management. And typically we present to the board or the council, and it's nice for them to know where we're coming from with our recommendations. Most organizations have us do that, some just like us to present to the manager, and then they'll make decisions and take their recommendations to council or the board on their own. Position description questionnaire form is that one step where the employees want to invest some time in that process. It is good. You're fine to work on it for a little while, then set it aside and come back and work on it again. It's also fine if you want to attach additional documentation or another sheet of paper if there's not enough room on there to list your job duties. But as I mentioned on the previous slide, it's fine if you want to do it electronically or if you want to handwrite it out. We are okay either way. You do want to list your primary job duties, and it's helpful if you give us an idea, some kind of an idea about how much time you spend on those different duties. So we do typically ask for a percentage of time, but we understand that can be hard to do and hard to try to figure that out. So if you're unable to do that, if you can maybe list your primary duties where you spend most of your time in the beginning of the document, and then maybe go down from starting with those duties that take up most of your time and maybe down to duties that do not take as much time, or maybe something you do just once a week or once a month. We will delve into the form when we come back for the interview, so we will have an opportunity to talk to you a little bit more about how much time you're spending in those different duties. There's also a place on the form for you to list the skills, experience, the training that you feel are needed to be hired into this position. And it might also be something that you don't need when you're hired, but once you're in the position, you might need to get this training, you might need to get these skills and this experience over time in order to be successful in that role. There'll be a place that'll ask you what type of supervision you might provide to other staff. So if you are a supervisor, it'll ask you to list the names of the other employees that you supervise and their job titles if you know them. And then there's a separate page that asks about the physical requirements of the job. That's pretty easy to do. There's a place with its check boxes that'll maybe ask you, for example, do you have to crawl under houses? Do you have to climb a ladder? What type of equipment do you have to use? How much weight might you have to lift on any given day? And that page is to help us with the ADA portion of the class specification or the job description. So it's always helpful for us. The more information you can give us, the better. But again, we will have an opportunity to talk to you more about that when we come back for the interviews. Once the employees have completed the position description questionnaire forms, they will then go to their direct supervisors. The supervisors have a separate page that they fill out in regards to the position, so they have the opportunity to look over what the employee wrote as far as their primary job duties, most difficult part of their job, the skills, the education requirements that they feel are needed. And then they will have some separate questions that they will complete in regards to the position. We do ask the supervisors not to change anything on the questionnaire if they feel like they need to add some additional information or comments, to do that on their separate page. Once the supervisors complete their page, they will then send the questionnaire to the department heads, and there's a place for the department heads to basically sign off that they've received it and that they've reviewed it. There's not a separate page for them to complete any questions about it, but of course you can always write some notes on the side if needed. And then all the questionnaire forms will go to Connie in Human Resources, and we'll be picking them up at the end of the month so that we can hopefully come back in September to start the interviews. We'll also start to work on the job analysis or the classification analysis, where we'll take the information we got from the questionnaire and from the interviews, and we'll start looking at the classification structure and determining which positions should go in which salary grades based on the information that we get, not only from the market and salary survey data, but also from internal analysis. I mentioned on the last slide that once we have all the information back from the employees in regards to their position, so that would be the position questionnaire forms, as well as the information we gather during the interviews with the employees, we're able to begin the analysis on our end, in which we're looking at all the different positions, the different classification job factors that are involved. This is an example of some of the classification or job factors that we look at, such as working environment, complexity of the job, the variety of the work, certain education, training, certifications that may be required to do the job, contact with others, both others within the organization and the public. What's involved in that contact? Are you answering the phone and passing it on to another employee? Are you having to explain policies and procedures? Are you having to resolve problems? So what is the nature of that contact that you have with others? Is there responsibility for resources? Resources could be other employees, maybe in supervision. It could be for children if you're in Parks and Rec. It could be for money, equipment, facilities. So there's all kinds of resources. So what is the position responsible for? How independent is the position? Are you out in the field working alongside with your crew leader? Maybe you are kind of told what we need to do next throughout the day. Or do you start off your day and you go out into the field and you know what you need to do and you work alone throughout the day, managing your time, managing your duties, making sure you get your work done? What are the consequences of error in the job? If there was a decision that was made and a mistake that was made, what is the risk exposure that might be involved in that? So these are all different job factors, classification factors that we look at that help us create that classification system. So typically positions with a comparable level of complexity and variety of work, education, they'll be placed at the same classification grade or close classification grade. So therefore, there's similar pay for similar position. You want equal pay for equal work, and that is an important part of this study. We just showed you factors that we look at and use in determining classification, salary grades, and the pay plan. These are items that we do not use or that are not used to determine classification. So volume of work. I use an example of myself when I mention volume of work. I used to work at UNC in human resources. My first job was working at the front desk. It was just me. I had 6 phone lines that I was answering all by myself, and a lot of times all 6 of them literally would ring at the same time. I was taking in applications as they came in, walk-ins, people calling to check on their application, people stopping by to look in the computer and see what kind of jobs there were. It was a lot of work. It was truly more than one person could handle. And when they went to reclassify my position or study it for possible reclassification, they looked at it and determined that it was classified the way that it should be. It was in the pay grade it needed to be. Even though I was very busy with the work that I had, they were studying my duties and not how much of the duties I had. So I was answering the phone and answering simple questions. I could look in the computer and check on the status of their application for them. It wasn't very complex. There was not a lot of difficulty to it. Yes, I was very busy, but the job was properly classified. So it was more about the duties of the job, not about how busy I was with those duties. We're also not looking at the incumbent's length of service, either with the city or in the position that they're currently in. We do ask for that on the position questionnaire form, but that's more just helpful for us to get an idea of how long someone's been in with the city and in that certain position that they are working in right now. But it does not come into play in regards to how a position's classified or what grade it may be classified at. It could come into play when we make recommendations on where employees may go within the pay plan, because we will make some of those recommendations, but not in regards to classification. Employee qualifications. We do look at the qualifications that are required to do positions, that are required for particular positions. What this is talking about is any qualifications that an incumbent employee may have above and beyond the minimum requirements. The example that I like to use, several years ago, we studied the town of Chapel Hill transit system, and they have several transit drivers that drive around the town, take students to different parts of Chapel Hill. They will pick up and take citizens to doctor's appointments when they make reservations. And we had a couple of employees at that time they were working as transit drivers. They'd recently graduated from law school there at Chapel Hill, and they were waiting to take the bar exam. And we remember clearly there was some frustration among 2 of them that had a law degree, and they felt as if the positions they were in should be higher grade with some higher pay because they had a law degree. So we had to just do some education, letting them know that we're truly looking at the duties of the positions and the requirements, and it's amazing and wonderful that they had law degrees, but they weren't required for the position. It didn't change the job duties of the position, so we're comparing all of those job duties and all those positions the same, and not looking at employee qualifications that they might have that are not relevant to the position. And then again, we're not looking at employee work performance. So you may have employees that might be in a position that are not performing all the duties, or they're not performing them at the level that is expected. And that's truly a performance management issue, not a classification issue. So at the conclusion of this study, we have several documents that we will be providing to the city. And most of these I've already mentioned throughout the presentation. But of course, we're going to, the most important is the updated classification structure. So the updated pay plan, it'll have job titles. Some of them may be revised, may have some new job titles, updated pay grades, updated salary ranges. That's all part of the classification and pay structure. There will also be new job descriptions, unless there's some that are already on file that are accurate and they reflect the current job duties. Every once in a while, an organization may have a few that they recently wrote on their own. in which case we can put them into our format so they're all in a similar format. But otherwise, we will be updating and writing brand new job descriptions for all the positions within the city. We'll have the market assessment, and that'll have a comparison of the City of Dunn's current pay plan in regards to the other pay plans we're looking at within other organizations. And then we'll also be looking at the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act, in regards to the positions. So primarily we'll be looking at whether or not a position should be exempt or non-exempt under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And then finally, we'll be making some recommendations on pay policies and pay practices that we may recommend once we've completed the study and we see some things that might be helpful for the organization. As I've mentioned a couple times, we will be doing a market study or a salary survey as part of the classification and pay study. And what we typically do is conduct a salary survey of similar organizations to the City of Dunn so that we can determine the market rate or the average of other salaries for similar positions. We typically consider the market to be comparable organizations to the City of Dunn. So they may be comparable in size, in the variety of services that they provide, such as police, fire, maybe they're an electricity, wastewater treatment plant. So we're looking for organizations that are comparable in the services and the size. There are also organizations that you find you might be losing your employees to. So over time, either department heads, supervisors, or human resources, when they conduct exit interviews, are going to find if there's certain organizations you may be losing some of your employees to. Now, they may be leaving for money. They may be going to another organization to do the similar kind of position and make more money, or there's other reasons, obviously, why employees leave as well. But you do want to make sure you're looking at those organizations that you are losing them to, just to make sure your pay plan's in line with them. We're also looking at organizations that you find you're getting applicants from. So organizations you may be recruiting from and hiring from for the same reason that you look at organizations that you might be losing employees to. Typically, your market study includes other organizations that are within a commutable distance. We typically consider this to be within an hour's drive, an hour and 15 minutes. So there may be other organizations that might be 2 hours away that might be similar as far as size, similar as far as services, but most likely you're not losing employees to those organizations because the drive would be more what would be reasonable for an employee to go to work on a daily basis. So using this data, or using this information and how we determine what's going to be your market, we had a discussion with the department heads and came up with a list of organizations that we feel meet this criteria and we wanted to include in the salary survey. So based on the discussions with the senior leadership team, which included the city manager and the department heads, it was determined that these organizations would be included in the salary survey or the market survey. So you can see that there are some neighboring counties as well as several municipalities. Some are smaller, such as Lillington, town of Anger, and some are larger, such as Fayetteville, Raleigh, and Cary. So we will be gathering their salary data, their pay plans, and making some comparisons to the City of Dunn to help us make a recommended and updated pay plan. If you have any questions about the classification and compensation study, the study process, please reach out to Connie Jernigan in Human Resources. When we come back to do our interviews in September, there will be 2 other consultants that will be working with me to conduct the interviews, and you'll have an opportunity then to ask any questions you may have also one-on-one from us. In addition, Connie could give you my email. I'll be the lead on the project, so if you had any questions that you needed from me, you're welcome to email me at any time. We are very excited to work with the City of Dunn on this project, and we look forward to meeting you all. Thank you so much.